Anyway, thank you everybody for coming. Just to quickly give you a kind of a rundown of what we would expect this evening. I think we're going to keep this fairly informal. Altaf will take 90% of the speaking duties because he's certainly the expert on this subject. I am not. And I'll introduce him in just a minute. At the end of the presentation, I think we will have some time for question and answer. So if you have questions, this is part of the primary reasons that we would have this meeting here tonight. So have those as we go. I'll just start off by saying my name's David West. I'm the councillor for Ward 4. You're currently in Ward 2, but that's okay. You don't need a passport. It's fine. This idea came up in kind of a partnership between the hospital and myself. I've always been very much of a believer that the hospital is a very, very important part of Ward 4. In fact, it's a very important part of Southern York region. If you think about the Ward 4, I mean, there's a number of very important assets in that ward. The hospital is certainly one of them. So I think it's a very good conversation to have periodically with our residents about places like Mackenzie Health. So I have worked with the hospital in various capacities over a very long time, and I've watched them grow, probably not to the extent that Mr. Kite here has seen them grow living in Richmond Hill for such a very long time, but it certainly has grown and morphed into various iterations of the hospital if you've lived here for long enough. And I think, frankly, it is a very important asset, as I said, in Richmond Hill. It's clearly a very important asset from a healthcare perspective, in not just Richmond Hill, but Southern York region. On a personal level, I know, I used to use the hospital every now and again when I was playing hockey. Not to say anything about my hockey skills, but every now and again I did end up in the emergency room. A number of years ago we had the birth of our son there, and we've had many other times, and we've always found it very compassionate and great care. So I think also another aspect that I think about a lot when I'm as a municipal councillor, the hospital is also really important in Richmond Hill from an economic perspective. I mean, it is the largest, I think the second largest actually employer in the town. I think the town of Richmond Hill might be the first largest. But it's increasingly over the last number of years, it's also become a very important part of our economic development strategy. I think one of the things that we have here in Richmond Hill, and coupled frankly with places like Markham, is the opportunity for some growth in the medical technology field. And I think Altaf will probably end up in his presentation talk a little bit more later about some of the things that the hospital is doing anyway to facilitate or to set the stage for that type of growth here in Richmond Hill as well. And that would come up during the discussion of the innovation unit, which I'll use as a hint of what is to come. So at this time I'd like to introduce Altaf Stationwala, who is our CEO of the hospital and has been so since 2010 when he was appointed. Before that time he was at Mount Sinai and William Osler and a number of other notable places before that. There's a lot to say about Altaf. I've known him for a number of years now. He is a very, very competent, passionate, and capable, intelligent individual and a perfect person to run an organization like Mackenzie Health, which is, when I feel a little stressed out as a councillor, I think about people that have it much worse than I do, and that's people that are running big organizations like the hospital. So, and Altaf handles it with grace. So, a couple of things, and I'm sure this will be discussed later in the presentation as well. Over the last few years, the hospital has, as I said, started out its innovation unit, which has become a really interesting and important first in kind of the medical field, and Altaf will talk about that a little bit later. And also recently in 2015, the hospital is constantly going through constant improvement, constantly finding better ways to do the things that they need to do to deliver health care. And they got an exemplary standing in their accreditation in 2015, which is a very, very important and high-level achievement at that time. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Altaf, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here. Ellie, maybe we can just turn down the lights a little bit so people can, that's a little bit better. We have the benefit, obviously, of having a very collaborative relationship with town of Richmond Hill. Actually, David sits on my President's Advisory Council just to ensure that we are getting all the interests of stakeholders at the table when we're dealing with any issues that the hospital may be facing. And actually, Mr. Kite served on that committee for many, many years as well as a resident of Richmond Hill. So we do these events probably about a dozen times a year with various councillors in Richmond Hill and in Vaughan. We also regularly present to the councils, be it Town of Richmond Hill, Vaughan, and recently we did actually King Township, which is another element of our catchment area. So what I want to do today is give you a little bit of an update as to what's going on at Mackenzie Health, a little bit about some of the pressures that we face in terms of population growth that then puts an impact on our day-to-day services, in particular in the emerge department. Give you a little bit of a sense of how we're performing both financially and from a patient care perspective, and then also give you a perspective on the Mackenzie Vaughan Hospital, which is under construction and is a very critical piece around the two hospital model of care that we've been discussing for many, many years, and really is a relief valve to this hospital because it cannot continue to sustain the growth for three communities in terms of being the only acute care hospital in all of Southwest York region. And you'll see some really compelling stats that just describe the pressures that we face every day in the current hospital. So these are some quick facts that sort of describe who we are and who are going to become. So we are one of the largest employers in Southwest York region. When we look at our physicians and our volunteer and staff base, we're looking at about 4,000 people. More compelling is the fact that we have to hire 2,000 new staff by the year 2020 as the Mackenzie Vaughan Hospital comes online. And that will then create our two hospital model of care. From a bed perspective, we run about 515 beds at the current location in Richmond Hill, a mixture of acute care beds, complex care beds, rehab beds, and about 165 long-term care beds. Vaughan is being built for 350 beds, but it has the capacity to go to 550 beds. So there's a number of shelf floors that we built in. We convinced the government that the population growth is such that we need to ensure that we have expansion capacity. And then some additional stats. The more compelling one is the emerge and urgent care visits. So that's 118,000 we just completed in the last fiscal year. We did a little experiment. We opened an urgent care center in Vaughan. It runs about 6 hours a day. It actually opens when our chronic kidney disease program shuts down at 4 o'clock. So we run from 4 to 10 on weekdays and from 10 to 4 on weekends. And we saw 15,000 visits in roughly our first year. So the demand is quite significant. We are obviously linked, as David was speaking to a very vibrant business community. And we benefit in Richmond Hill and in Southwest York region with the largest healthcare technology cluster in Ontario. It actually is even larger than Waterloo, where we tend to see the tech sector located. So there's a huge opportunity to partner, and one of those partnerships is actually, we'll hear about very shortly, is with a local company called CompuGen. So this was an international bid that we put out, and a Richmond Hill company won that out, competing with the likes of IBM and others. So we're very proud of that. And we just recently won the Innovation Award from the Lawn Chamber. So we're very proud of that. Just really recognizing the effort and the work we're doing around innovation at the hospital and our innovation unit, which I will speak to. Also, as much as we are a large employer, we also obviously have a number of our staff that live and work in this community. So you can see as a percentage, 91% of our physicians and 65% of our staff live in York Region, 39% of our physicians and 25% of our staff live in Richmond. So, the two hospital model of care is an important piece, and the reason it is being built and the reason it is linked to one organization, and we were a little bit worried, I think, probably my predecessors around a freestanding Vaughan Hospital with its own board and its own leadership, that it would cannibalize this hospital. We actually don't have that threat. It's part of an integrated model now under Mackenzie Health. But this will be, with Vaughan coming online, the largest increment to the healthcare system since the development of Markham Stouffville Hospital. So this is the first brand new hospital that's incremental to the system since Markham Stouffville. All the others that you've seen, Humber River as an example, is a consolidation of 3 hospitals into one. Oakville, that was just recently built, is a replacement hospital. So this is the first net new hospital, and it's being added to an existing hospital. So we are facing a growth path that no one else has ever experienced, probably since Markham opened, and it was a very different era in time when that organization opened. A sense of the geography. So this is the Mackenzie Richmond Hill Hospital, the Mackenzie Vaughan Hospital. They're 8.5 kilometers apart, located on major Mackenzie Drive, both of them, and hence the name Mackenzie Health. Also, obviously, a lot of history around that name. But some argued that the locations are too close together. When we actually looked at the density of where the population was growing, those locations made a lot of sense. Especially when you look at a subway line coming up Yonge Street and one that's already being built up Jane Street, that's where the density of the population is really being located, in that sort of purple area that kind of bounds Richmond Hill and Vaughan. So this is a slide I've been sharing for about 4 years that starts to talk about how the services will be distributed between the two hospitals. What we fought for, and we fought hard with government, because there were all kinds of other models. We don't need 2 full-service hospitals. We can have one as an ambulatory site, one as a full-service site. So an ambulatory site similar to Branson or Queensway. We felt that both communities needed full-service hospitals. And by full-service, we need a 24/7 emerge, and that comes then with a whole host of other services like ICU beds, surgery, medicine, ORs, lab, medical imaging, pharmacy. But we also felt that there was an opportunity then to have specialty focuses for each of the hospitals. So the Mackenzie Richmond Hill Hospital, we focus on complex care, on rehabilitation, on chronic kidney disease, and a whole host of specialty clinics. Vaughan will be specialized in mental health, stroke, obstetrics, and pediatrics. And that's sort of how the services have been divvied up. Now, one could argue, why didn't you put things the other way around? This is just sort of how we had to kind of split the programming elements. The rationale behind this is that we could have taken a much easier route, which is to have 2 obstetric programs in both hospitals, 8.5 kilometers apart. We would have been doing about 2,000 deliveries in each site, which would have been sort of a reasonable critical mass, but not enough to become subspecialized. So by consolidating obstetrics, as an example, we now do 4,000 deliveries in one location. We can now recruit obstetricians who do sort of the types of cases that are dealing with higher risk deliveries. So maternal fetal medicine specialists tend to be located at a Mount Sinai or a Sunnybrook. When you start to do 4,000 deliveries, they are able to justify relocating their practices and actually are seeing a reasonable number of cases that they can actually have a vibrant practice. The same thing can be said for rehabilitation beds. So inpatient rehab requires a specialty like physiatrist, again a hard physician group to recruit for. With a consolidated program, you have enough critical mass that you can start to build a program that can be viable. And with the sites being 8.5 kilometers apart, there is an ability to move certain volumes back and forth as well. The philosophy is, irrespective of which door you come into, the Richmond Hill site or the Vaughan site, you will get comprehensive care, and if there's a requirement for a transfer, it will be facilitated. So this starts to deal with the pressures of growth, and we have 2 large communities in Richmond Hill and Vaughan that are growing with a large base attached to them. But we also have pressure from the township of King, which is, as they're saying, the new Milton. Small base, but growing at an incredible pace. And as is typical, as soon as you bring water to a community, when you get off well water, you start to see the subdivisions go up, which is sort of what happened in Milton and kind of what King is facing. So we are facing unprecedented population growth along with an aging population. And what's different, and it took some time to convince the planners within the Ministry of Health, because they tend to look at regional numbers, not municipal numbers, is the density of growth that's occurring in our community. I think any of you driving up and down Yonge Street or any of these other communities, you can start to see, Thornhill City Centre, Yonge and 16. We're not talking about sort of single detached homes anymore. We're talking about large-scale development, very similar to what you'd see in metropolitan Toronto. And that really drives a different kind of need for healthcare in terms of absolute capacity. So, our biggest challenge, and I do get complaints about the care that people receive. The most significant complaint is the wait in the emergency department. And the reason the waits are so significant is that we are just seeing unprecedented volumes that this single hospital was never equipped to manage. So on a typical day, we're seeing between 250 and 320 patients. When I started about 6 years ago, we were seeing on average about 200 patients a day. We are seeing a huge surge in ambulance visits. We at the Richmond Hill site see the most amount of York Region EMS traffic. We see over 50% of all York Region EMS traffic. The balance goes then to South Lake or the Market. So in the last 4 years, 38% growth in our emerge activity. 109,000 visits, and we were projected to do 134,000 in 2021. So what does that mean? The stat is quite scary. So we are seeing more emerge visits than we were anticipating for the two hospitals today. So that starts to kind of give you a picture of why the waits are sometimes a bit more challenging, and why in particular it takes so long to get to a bed, because that's our biggest challenge. The wait, once you're admitted to get to an inpatient bed, is one of our most challenging pieces. So we've surpassed the volume that the government thought we would achieve with two hospitals today, between the urgent care center and the site in Richmond Hill, and this year we'll go well beyond it, 118% over the actual planned volume. And that's why we were so happy. We planned all that flexibility because we knew they were going to be undersizing the new hospital. It's been a difficult flu year as well, so we were not the only ones in surge. You can see some of the headlines in a whole host of papers, and really inappropriate environments where people are receiving care. A term that is now coined in the papers, unconventional bed spaces. So that's putting patients in hallways, putting patients in alcoves, putting patients in auditoriums. Those were some of the things that we had to compel ourselves to deal with in January and February, and in many cases, very inappropriate spaces to deliver care. Very inappropriate. For us, it's even worse, because for us, the pressure point is medical beds. And this chart starts to describe a ratio of ED visits to medical beds. And you can see, comparing ourselves to South Lake, William Ulster, Trillium, and Northwood General, we are the worst in terms of the ratio of visits to medical beds, which then starts to paint the picture of why you have to wait so long to get to a bed. We just don't have enough beds. So our funnel is full, and we're really worried about how we're going to get through the next 3 years before Vaughan opens up to provide some relief to the Richmond House site. You can see what that does. So the hours, in terms of the waits, have continued to grow because of the challenge of the under capacity of medical beds. So we are looking at a solution even today before Vaughan opens to find temporary locations to relocate some non-acute care beds. So not the medical or surgical beds. We're trying to figure out what we could do to find a way to open some additional medical beds, because it's only going to get worse before Vaughan opens, and we know that the community will not get the care it needs, and there is, we believe, significant risk in delivering care in an environment where you're over capacity all the time. So this is an interim solution up until Vaughan opens. And we're just working with government trying to find a location to temporarily house some patient beds. Let's skip this slide. This is an important slide because it starts to describe the journey we've been on. When I came in 2010, we were facing a deficit at that time, and we've turned ourselves around and have run balanced budgets for 6 consecutive years and have had a positive working capital position. However, we are not forecasting a balanced position for next year. We've taken the position the only way we can balance is by reducing services, and you can see the growth that's occurred. So our challenge is that the volumes that you're seeing that would have been sort of delivered under two hospitals will be funded in a separate model because a second hospital will be open. That has not happened. So we're pushing government to recognize the growth that we're facing and to fund us because we're not in a position, and the board's taking that position, to reduce service to the community. So these are some stats that talk about the satisfaction scores. We send out phone surveys. We get about 50%, so 50% of the number of ED visits you're seeing do respond to these surveys, and we typically get about 80% satisfaction. Would you recommend this hospital to a family or a friend. So it's been trending up a little bit, but we're overall looking at over 80%, which we're quite happy with considering the challenges that we're facing in the emergency department. So this is a very important slide because it starts to talk about how we compare to other hospitals. So we are funded on what is called pay for performance in our emergency department. And there are a number of metrics that the government looks at. So the first metric looks at PIA, which is the Physician Initial Assessment Time. How quickly are you able to see a physician? You can see that over the last 3 years, we've improved that significantly, moving from 3.4 hours to 2.7 hours. This next area looks at how long it takes to be seen as a non-admitted patient for low acuity. We've again improved that from 4.2 hours to 3.9. This is for high acuity. Again, we've made some gains there. Where we've continued to struggle and have actually gotten worse is how long it takes to get to a bed once the decision to admit has occurred. So patients are spending over 2 days in our emergency department before they get to a bed. This talks about how we rank relative to all the other hospitals on this P4R funding. So there's 73 hospitals in the province that are in this program, and we rank 10 out of 73. Back in 14-15, we were about 55. So we've actually made huge gains. But the reason we're still number 10 is because we are the 71st worst performer on this one metric, because we just don't have enough beds. So that's our challenge, and the reason I felt it was important for you to hear this, because I think what people say in the community, I can't believe how long I waited for care in the emergency department and how chaotic it is, and it looks like a mashing at many sort of moments of the day. That's just our reality because the second hospital isn't up and running yet. Now, David did point out that we got exemplary standing. We actually got it for a second time now. So 2017, we got exemplary standing for a second time. This is the highest award you can receive from Accreditation Canada. Accreditation Canada is a national body that reviews all hospitals and health systems across the country, actually internationally as well. They're in the Middle East, they're in South America. And exemplary standing means that we surpassed the standards that they put forward. And we've done it now 2 years in a row. So this 8 years, we will be at the exemplary standing rating. And what that means is we got 99.8% compliance against 1,800 plus standards. So very proud of that, and I can tell you how great we are. Obviously, I'm a little biased. This is an independent body that obviously provides that assessment. So we are investing significantly in both hospitals, but what I want to stress is that the philosophy of Mackenzie Health is that all of our contracts and all of our investments are actually consistent across both sites. So we signed a $300 million contract with Philips, a managed equipment service agreement that replenishes our equipment for the next 18 years. So typically what would happen, we would buy one-off pieces of equipment, a CT and MR. We would use it well beyond its useful life, and then we would actually end up spending more money on using an obsolete piece of equipment. This ensures that we have a replenishment plan for our equipment for the next 18 years at both hospitals, the New Vaughan Hospital, but also the Mackenzie Richmond Hill Hospital. We have also entered into a contract with Compugen, which is, again, as I said, a local technology company, to build a smart hospital. And I'll talk a little bit about that, but it is integrating all the various pieces of technology to create smart workflows, which is to use our digital pieces of equipment in an integrated way. And I'll describe a little bit about what that is. And the last piece is Epic. So we are in the midst of implementing a new electronic medical record. It will go live in July, and it will transform how we deliver care within the hospital environment. But more importantly for our community, we will have an application called MyChart, which will give you huge abilities. We already have one that's hosted by Sunnybrook. This will be a more advanced version of this that will enable you to look at all of your test results, all of your case history. Will enable you to reschedule appointments. If a schedule becomes available earlier, you will get a notification for it. It's a very robust system that kind of brings us into the 21st century in terms of technology. And finally gives patients access to records and information that is their own information that they've never really been able to see. So what have we done with the Philips contract today at the Mackenzie Richmond Hill site? We upgraded our older MRI. We just actually bought a new one about 2 years ago. We upgraded our interventional radiology suite, and we're in the process of acquiring a new CT scanner. So that's all integrated as part of the $300 million Philips contract. So obviously it enables us to invest in this site as well as all the new equipment for the new Vaughan site. We have a state-of-the-art data center. So we, as you can appreciate, are pretty tight on space in this hospital. And we actually looked at what other technology companies were doing. So Google and some of the other tech companies have these mobile data centers. So we have a portable center outside in the backyard of the hospital, and that's where all of our technology and our servers are housed. It has its own diesel generator, and remarkably, we've saved $150,000 in electricity bills because it's outside. So most of the time, because these pieces of equipment generate lots of heat, they have big air conditioning units, we just use outside air to cool it. So great benefit. And then the electronic medical record, which goes live, I'm told, in 72 days. So the countdown has started. So this obviously is an integrated solution that creates a smart hospital. And I'll give you some live examples. But more importantly, it's an integrated solution across both hospitals and our ambulatory sites. So I'm gonna give you a sense of what smart workflow means. So this is what we call a code blue. So today, in 99% of the hospitals, a code blue is an overhead page, which means that a patient is in distress and we need to administer some kind of cardiac intervention. There's an assigned code team in the hospital, so that code team gets a page or listens to, obviously, the overhead announcement. They do a mad dash to the location where the code has been announced. At the same time, the patient may be on meds. Those meds have to be stopped if they're being infused. The bed has to be adjusted. A whole bunch of other manual things have to happen. In the smart hospital, which will happen in the Richmond Hill site, this smart workflow in the next year or so, the following things would happen. The telemetry system that the patient is on, the physiological monitor, knows it's a code because a certain threshold has been reached. It pages silently the team. The team has RTLS, or real-time locating tags, on their ID badges. Those tags can override any building automation system. So if they come within proximity of a door, the door opens. If they're by an elevator, they take control of that elevator. So all those things get them to that code that much faster. The physiological monitor talks to the infusion pump, looks at the formula, knows which meds to stop. So those meds get automatically stopped before the code team even arrives. The bed, the smart bed, knows it's a code, automatically adjusts to the code position. And a whole bunch of other things happen automatically. The irony today in our environment in most hospitals, all of these pieces of equipment exist today and they have a digital output. But no one has integrated those digital outputs. And that is what CompuGen will be helping in terms of the smart workflow. So we will create upwards of 50 plus smart workflows as we evolve, and they will exist both in the Richmond Hill site and the Vaughan site. So what have we done? We saved precious seconds that can ultimately save someone's life. So David spoke of this. We also created a separate company. It's under the arm of Mackenzie Health, called Mackenzie Innovation Institute, or MI Squared. And what this is a platform for these technology vendors to work with us to experiment with some of these new technologies. And we have a simple model, and I come from Mount Sinai prior to being here, where we'd invest huge amounts of dollars in commercialization of partnerships with vendors, and we would fight about the proprietary technology. This model is much, much simpler. Vendor partners with us, they put some seed money into the innovation, they get to test it, and if it works, we go first to market as Mackenzie Health. They keep all of the intellectual property. So they're more incented to work with us, and in the end, we don't really worry about the commercialization because it's a lengthy process. We just worry about making the environment better for patients and the community. So we're actually that much better as a provider. The income stream is actually less important to us. So as of today, we have big players like Philips, We have Sodexo, who's a support service provider. So one of the things that they're piloting right now is it looks like R2D2. It's a little UV machine that actually sterilizes rooms. So instead of using alcohol rinse, these UV rays have a much greater impact of keeping an environment clean, and we can kill all of these nasty bugs that cause such harm to patients. So Sodexo is another partner. BlackBerry is another partner. So these are all technologies that we're trialing, and we're trialing them today on a live unit in the hospital. We call it our innovation unit. So we've trialed a few interesting things here as well. So as you can imagine, hand hygiene is a very important element of keeping patients safe. And there's typically 4 moments of hand hygiene, but the 2 most important are when you enter the room and when you leave the room. So as in most hospitals, the hand hygiene police come around with their flip charts and they monitor whether people are washing their hands. So when you know the police are there, you tend to behave a bit differently, and there's a much greater compliance. So most hospitals get about 90% compliance. What we did with this innovation unit, those same tags I talked about, those RTLS tags, we put them on the staff members' badges, which means we can monitor their movements throughout the floor. Those tags are also linked to the hand hygiene dispenser. So what we found was 50% compliance. That was the real number. What we started then to do is give each staff member a report card after each shift of what their compliance was, and now we're well above 95% on this unit. But it's real measures, and now we have about 3 million measures of hand hygiene compliance. The other thing that we started to do is we started to experiment with the mobile phones. So we gave our staff mobile phones so that they could communicate with physicians, with other providers. It actually failed. We found that staff weren't using it. A, the phones didn't have enough functionality, but B, it was much easier just to find someone down the hall. Now what we know is that this 34-bed unit in Richmond Hill is 4 times the size in Vaughan, just because the new building standard are all private rooms. So we know that maybe when the floor plate gets bigger, they might need to use these types of technology. So here was a failure, but we learned from it, and we're going to be improving upon it. Other things that we've done is starting to hook up some of the other technologies. So I've talked about the infusion pumps. We also have a huge amount of data now. So you've heard about big data. We have so many outputs of data that start to monitor the movement of staff. So for example, we can now actually monitor whether staff are going to the patient's room on an hourly basis like they're supposed to as per the nursing standards. So there's so much data being captured and so much ability to improve practice. And you could say, well, the unions must be very upset about this. Well, ONA, who's our union, is very excited because we can actually demonstrate just how hard the staff are working and ensure that they can practice at the best levels. So these are, again, some of the partners. I mentioned BlackBerry. Cisco is another partner on the cable laying. Hillrom is a bed vendor. We've also brought in academia, so Ivy is partnering this as well to make sure that a lot of what we're doing is evidence-based and there's good research and objectivity to some of our outputs and our results. So that was a little bit about what's going on at Mackenzie Richmond Hill. I'm now going to switch and give you a little bit of background on the new hospital that's currently being built and give you a sense of our journey to get there. There's also a great video that will give you a sense of what it will look like. It's very, very accurate. Ingrid is here. She's the president of the foundation. She's in the midst of a $250 million campaign for both the Vaughan Hospital and the Richmond Hill site. So if you'd like to make a donation, she'll take your money today. But it is the largest capital campaign of any community hospital. So obviously we will need community support for this project. The hospital's total project cost is $1.6 billion. And the government grant, the provincial grant for that is $1.3 billion. So the balance is paid for from a variety of sources, including funds.
The new Mackenzie Vaughan Hospital, Canada's first smart hospital, is part of Mackenzie Health's 2-hospital model that is designed to serve the diverse and growing community of Vaughan and York region. At Major Mackenzie Drive and Jane Street, and 8 kilometers west of Mackenzie Richmond Hill Hospital, a generous canopy reaches forward to create a clear sense of destination and welcome. Entering the Vic Design Family Welcome Center and main lobby, the double-height space is filled with daylight and warm natural materials. A feature stair is set against a large, multi-story glazed wall overlooking the main courtyard. Generous drop-off areas provide ample space for vehicles and pedestrians. The Magna Emergency Woman-Child and the West Public entrance are all clearly delineated destinations. Navigation to the parking structure is easy with direct access to a south-facing glazed linkway that connects to the hospital within a terraced garden, emphasizing the importance of landscape as a calming and restorative environment. Visitors entering from the parking linkway can proceed straight up the stairs or ahead to the public elevators to amenities such as a retail pharmacy on the main street on level 1. The library's prominent location reinforces the hospital's important role in health education. The cafeteria below, bathed in natural light, opens up to the main floor, bringing a sense of vitality to the main street. Interior and exterior spaces are uniquely woven together. Welcome desk, registration, and the main public elevators are straight ahead and visible upon entering the hospital, making wayfinding simple and clear. Visitors have orienting views to the outside at each public elevator lobby, a key component of intuitive wayfinding. Inpatient rooms are efficiently organized with communication stations nearby, ensuring that staff are readily accessible to their patients. Designed with the needs of patients and families in mind, natural wood accent materials bring a sense of home. Privacy for the patient is always considered. Large windows provide expansive views to the outside. Continuing improvement of healthcare delivery is exemplified with the distinctly prominent location of the Learning and Development Pavilion. Expected to be complete in 2020, the Mackenzie Vaughan Hospital will create 1,000 new construction jobs and will require an additional 1,800 staff and 100 new physicians to provide care when it opens its doors in late 2020. The new Mackenzie Vaughan Hospital is state-of-the-art, designed through the eyes of the patient, connected to nature, and enabled by smart technology to meet the needs of the fast-growing community of Vaughan and York region. As part of an integrated 2-hospital model, including the Mackenzie Richmond Hill Hospital, Urgent Care Centre, and numerous community-based programs, Mackenzie Vaughan Hospital will provide seamless and exceptional care for patients and families close to home.
So the journey to build a hospital, let alone a brand new facility that's not replacing an existing one, is a long process. Typical cycle time is about 10 years. So we started on this path in 2010 that looked at the initial business case, and that business case had to factor in the distribution of services between the Richmond Hill Hospital and the Vaughan Hospital, some of the growth parameters. We fought pretty hard around capacity. We actually wanted 700 beds, so just so you can get a sense of the negotiating process. Then we get into the functional programming, which is starting to get into detail of the spaces that would be required, and then the specifications, which is stage 3, that then go to market, that then get bid upon by the company that will ultimately design, build, finance, and maintain this hospital for the next 30 years. And we are now in stage 5. On the top is the Infrastructure Ontario process, Infrastructure Ontario is an agency of government that delivers large capital projects, everything from hospitals to courthouses to all those service centers you see along the 401, and some of the light rapid transit that's being built. I think the Eglinton Crosstown is also an IO project. And then we have a 30-year contract that ensures that the company that we've selected not only builds this but maintains it for the next 30 years, so that that's built into the price, and obviously that's why these projects have a slightly higher price tag attached to them. This is the groundbreaking ceremony that occurred in October, and obviously a number of politicians were present, our local provincial politicians and mayors and others. Now we've taken a very different approach to how this hospital will operate and really the objective. And it starts from the principle of the fact that at the end of the day, it's just a building. And if the culture of the staff and the ability to deliver compassionate and care with empathy does not exist, then it's just still a building. And there's lots of examples where you look at Google reviews of newer hospitals that basically say, nice new shiny building, same lousy staff. So I started to show those kinds of statements to my team. I said, in the end, we want to make sure that we don't forget about what's core. And what's core here are the people that deliver care. It's people caring about people. So we learned a lot of lessons. We spent a lot of time with the community. We've been doing this for 4 years. And we really started to focus on the needs of the patients and the staff, and really bringing in many patients into the design of the facility, but also talking about how do they want the service to be delivered. And that's where the principle of the smart hospital came to be as well. Because what our staff would say, well, there's so many things that get in the way of us doing our work, that if you could free up our time, we could do more and more of the face-to-face that you really want to see. Time with families, time with patients, explaining what's happening, what has to happen next. Again, the number one complaint, nine times out of 10 that I would get, it's around communication. And most of the time we fail on communication because we don't have enough time. So those are some of the things that got built into the vision of what we're going to create beyond just the bricks and mortar and the amazing spaces. But I do want to share some of the amazing spaces with you. This is very quickly the consortia. So it's a design, build, finance, and maintain project. So what does that mean? That means that we've put out output specifications that are being now bid to and then ultimately designed to. So we're 50% complete on the design. So the design and they build at the same time. So they're actually digging right now. They haven't completed the design yet. The other part of this is they finance this. So we pay, in effect, a mortgage over 30 years. The province pays us, we pay the consortia, and that pays for this project over 30 years. So it's privately financed. And the other part of this is it's maintained for the next 30 years. So I don't have to worry about moving money from my capital budget that would go to medical equipment to pay for a roof or a window. That's already built into the project. And that's always the challenge. When we struggle for capital in hospitals, we always tend to focus on the patient care, which is our core business. And that's why you see many hospitals in disrepair, because it's a challenging priority to manage. So just some features, and you can see it's evolved. So you saw kind of a greenish tinge to this now. It's kind of become much more transparent glazing. So that's sort of the latest look. It's continuing to evolve as the design evolves, but the building as it is what you're going to see. It's 11 stories, so a very vertical building, 1.2 million square feet. So to give you scale, Brampton Civic is 1.2 million square feet. The recent Humber Hospital is 1.6. So a very large facility. We felt that a compact vertical design would be more efficient. We've learned from other hospitals that have gone more horizontal. Challenge is when you come into the wrong entrance on a horizontal hospital, it's very, very difficult to get to the right place. You're walking forever. If you go to the wrong place here, it's usually just taking an elevator ride to the right floor. Other things that you see, this is a learning and development pavilion. So we felt that we needed to give the space and the technology for our staff to get their training on site. So this is in effect a little mini university space with a number of auditoriums and classrooms where a lot of the training and in-service can happen in-house. It also becomes a great community space in the evenings as well that we will open up to the general public. This is in effect a large podium that you see on either side, and the tower goes up around it. So this is in effect the inpatient section of the hospital. So this is the main entrance. It's a very significant, prominent canopy, and this is the main drop-off for patients and visitors. This is that learning and development center that I was speaking to. This is the main entrance, so this is a large atrium, and what you see is a staircase to go up to the main peri-op and surgical area, day surgery and so forth, and then a staircase down to the main cafeteria public space. On the right-hand side is a large cascading garden that you saw images of before. On the left-hand side is another opening with actually a double-story fireplace that I think I can probably show you. I'll show you in the next image. This is a link from the parking structure. So we were very worried about a very dark tunnel that people would have to go through from the parking structure to the main hospital. What they've done is they've excavated around that entire area. So as you're walking from the parking structure to the main hospital, you're walking with an open view to a garden. And then this is the main entrance. So I like to describe this as a bridge. So this is that cascading garden that I was speaking to. This is the cafeteria floor underneath. And then this is that double-story fireplace that you see. So it's a very powerful, welcoming space. It's not at all like an institutional type of a setting that you would see typically in a hospital. And then finally, I just want to give you a sense of the publicity we've gotten around the Smart Hospital. So this was just the month of February where we hit the front page of a number of key industry journals, Hospital News, Healthcare Technology, and Healthcare Infrastructure. So we are making, I think, a name for Mackenzie Health, and I think for the communities of Richmond Hill and Barrow in particular. So I've covered a lot of material, but now, as David said, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, clarify any points, or just speak about anything